Gators Breakdown episode 75 is ready to go. The Gators have their man at quarterback and are reaping the benefits of a great Friday night lights. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And my two co-hosts with me for this episode and many episodes of the past, many more episodes in the future, Joe Vizzi. Find Joe on Twitter at JoeV_GatorsPod and Bill Sykes on Twitter at RealB Sykes. Gentlemen, with all the big news, we knew we had to do a early Gators breakdown of this past huge weekend. I think we got something boiling here.
Yeah, this has been a good feeling this weekend, man.
Been cooking, Bill, huh?
Yeah, the news has been coming in hot and heavy. I think we could probably stay on here all day, but I know you guys are just as busy as our listeners. So,
yeah, I mean it's not just the Matt Corral news, but how about the other commits, Bill? How about Dunlap? You know, and I mean that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah,
I mean
one of the things we'll probably communicate to you guys, and I think it's going to come through in the stuff we talk about today, is that this is really not about Matt Corral or Curtis Dunlap or any one particular recruit. It's the vibe that's going through the recruiting world right now about Florida. There's a fire that's being rekindled among these prospects that we really haven't seen probably since Ole Miss of 2015. And it's something that's just been, it's felt very stagnant for a while. There's been a lot of questions and a funk, but suddenly something has sparked, something has ignited. And, you know, it's a long road. You know, signing day is still a ways off, but suddenly there's life here. There's something going on, and I think we're gonna really paint this picture for you guys.
Yeah, that's not to say recruiting, you know, hasn't been good. It's just as a national perception and as a perception of out there at Gator Nation. You know, this is like Bill said, and you know, this was going back to a couple of years when the recruiting world was on fire after the Tennessee and Ole Miss wins. This is probably about the best, you know, we've felt general overall with recruiting since that time. Before we dive in here, Matt Corral will be the big focus of this episode. But as the guys mentioned, you know, this is about recruiting just in general for the Florida Gators getting a big-time quarterback. Remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Also, when on iTunes, rate and review the show. Let Gator Nation know what they're getting with Gators Breakdown. Guys, I'm not so sure we and the rest of Gator Nation have wiped the smiles off our faces after Matt Corral from California made this commitment to the Gators. Social media, message boards were a lot of fun in the time around the commitment, and Gator Nation was and is excited instead of the recent back and forth about, you know, McElwain's recruiting efforts lately, you know, the staff nailed Friday Night Lights. I think we really got excited when the list came out and we knew the guys that were coming on campus and the potential that this had, and the potential was met in getting one of the biggest commits since Jim McElwain has taken over the program. Matt Corral went public with his commitment on Twitter, posting a picture of him and Jim McElwain and posting the following message. The recruiting process has been an amazing and humbling journey. First, I would like to thank all the coaches and programs that have recruited me. I've met some amazing people throughout the process. Secondly, I would like to thank my family, coaches, and friends for their support. After thoughtful consideration and talking with my family, I have decided to take my talents to the University of Florida. #AllBite18. Let's do something special, Gator Nation. So it was down to Florida and Georgia for Corral after he decommitted from USC. He has since canceled that Georgia trip and will be an early enrollee for Florida. So, guys, Corral, 6'2", 196, rated as the number 23 overall player in the nation. 4-star prospect by 24/7 Sports Composite. Number two pro style rated passer. Overall, number 3 prospect in the loaded state of California. Once he decommitted from USC, the Gators were quick to pounce on him, and McElwain, and especially Doug Nussmeier and Tim Skipper, were instrumental in, wait for it, corralling Corral. So we had a show a couple of weeks ago, you know, what could happen with quarterback recruiting because the Gators were going, you know, after Justin Fields as well. It played out in a way where Florida was still able to haul in one of the nation's best high school quarterbacks. So, Bill, how excited should Gator Nation be after this pickup?
Very excited. Look, without qualification, this kid is a plug-and-play ready passer. This is not somebody that Mac has to take 3 to 4 years to chisel out of a piece of stone. This guy has the tools. He has the ability. He's got the statistics to back it up. This is a big-time quarterback prospect. Sure, he's coming from California. Yeah, there's a little bit of a funk around, his reputation from some things we'll discuss. But this is a big-time prospect. And sure, myself included, the Gator Nation has been primed for Justin Fields. We wanted the top guy in the country. But, a lot of services out there have this guy in the top 10 prospects in the nation. This is a kid who's thrown for 3,000 yards over the past each season. He's well over 60% completion rate. He's got a career 4.9 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio, with that being 7.3 as a junior last year. This kid is tremendous. He's an Army All-American. I'm thrilled. This is exactly, if you remember back when we were discussing the recruiting show after National Signing Day, and I said, look, this is good news, but where do we go from here? How do we fix this? I said, get more quality arms in camp. Well, Jim McElwain just did that in a big way.
Yeah, Bill, let's talk about the ripple effect this is going to have, too. There's rumors swirling right now that Jacob Copeland is set to make his commitment video to the University of Florida this week. And this is just going to be a trickle effect. All as it takes, and we talked about this with Justin Fields, on a couple episodes ago, all as it takes is one big recruit, especially a quarterback at the most important position in the game. And, you got guys lining up at the door waiting to be Gators. And, David, you and I kind of had a little disagreement on Twitter earlier about this, but I agree with Bill. This kid, you got arguably your highest rated quarterback in history coming into your school, and he's coming in January. This kid has to start as a freshman. Okay. We've seen the red shirt. We've seen the guys that, we were told are development projects and stuff like this, but I honestly believe that McElwain had this all set up from the jump. You bring in a guy like Steer, who's a bridge quarterback, and, you kind of – I don't want to write off Franks. A lot of people are dug in on him, but, haven't the coaches already written him off, Bill? Wouldn't you say that with all this, you don't have to be intelligent and you don't have to really know football to kind of see that the stars are lining up to show that the coaches kind of have written Franks off. And Bill, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Franks put that video up about, the doubters and, in showing him throwing into a net from, 40 yards away. And then he just put up a recent video of him throwing a touchdown pass to Tyreke Cleveland, which looked like a 70-yard pass. This to me is Franks telling his teammates and his coaches, like, you're doubting me. And I think that the coaching staff has already written off Felipe Franks. And I think Malik Zaire is going to start this year. I think he's going to play well. And I think Matt Corral comes in January, and I think he's the starter in 2018. And I had experience with people on Twitter, but a 5-star kid across the country who can make all the throws, 10 yards to 60 yards. We saw his long toss in the Elite 11 camp. I think he threw the ball 76 yards, Bill, is that right? 78 yards?
It was 77.
77 yards, yeah. So
and people were comparing it to Franks there.
And we can know that he could air it out. I think that this was all carefully planned from 4 months ago when Jim McElwain reached out to Malik Zaire and mutual interest. I think McElwain, not about Matt Corral, but I think McElwain knew that he wanted either or a quarterback in this class that was going to start for him in 2018. And we know that there's only about, what, David, would you say 4 quarterbacks in this recruiting cycle that are probably ready to start in 2018? And Corral's one of them. You got Trevor Lawrence, who's probably going to start for Clemson. You got Justin Fields, who I assume is going to end up at Florida State at this point, but obviously we don't know. And he's going to probably start wherever he goes. You can't have the #1 ranked recruit in the country and not have him start. And I think Matt Corral, I think he's one of the 4 that are ready to go. And, and I think him being an early enrollee is huge, Bill. I think kids want to play with this kid. I think he has an infectious personality. You always see him with a big smile on his face. And I think the ripple effect from Matt Corral is just as big as him coming to Florida.
Yeah, I agree with some things you said and disagree with others. First of all, the ripple effect, I think you're right. And I want people to visualize this for a second. Okay, Matt Corral is in, and let's assume that he is what we believe he is, a big-time plug-and-play passer, a guy that can start for Florida and be a big part of the solution at that position. The best thing that could happen for this guy is to have a big-time offensive line coming in and some good-time receiving targets. In particular, I love it when a young quarterback has a big-time tight end. And I believe Florida just got that in Kyle Pitts in a 6'6", was he 230 pounds frame, laser timed 4.740. And I know people will get so attached to that guy runs a 4.4 or 4.3 or 4.5. When you're that big and you run a real 4.7, not just your high school coach with a stopwatch, that's moving. And the fact that, Florida is also looking at possibly their best offensive line class. Now, and again, ratings wise, 2006 or was it 7 when the penalties came in? Only one of those was even a blue chip recruit, and they're all pros, But on paper, this may be the stars aligning on offense a little bit, where you've got some big time receivers, a big time tight end, a historically good offensive line class, and the best quarterback that you've signed on paper, at least back to 2011, when Jeff Driscoll was a hire in a composite. And I think his talents got wasted a little bit, under Muschamp. But yeah, this is tremendous.
And some running backs people are really liking too. Clement already there, but Pierce, on the radar, and some others as well. So yeah, you could really feel not really holes on offense, but you can build, as we're saying, build around Matt Corral here with some other high rated prospects here. So yeah, and going back to what Joey and I was saying, I'm not writing Franks off.
Me either.
And it's just, it's I guess an ideal.
Have the coaches, David. Have the coaches, David.
Oh, I don't
think
know
they have.
I mean, I just don't think. I don't think bringing in Zaire could be a sign for 2017. I don't know if it's a sign for 2018.
Yeah, I don't think it's a long-term write-off. And I didn't take Franks' tweet to be a message to the coaches or his team. I took that to be something towards the fans that were kind of questioning because of the Zaire move. And, look, Franks is not Corral. Franks was, a little lower rated, still a top 100 player in the country, a big-time 4-star quarterback. But we all knew coming in that the scouts were looking at this guy and saying, look, he has a 6'6 frame. He has the big-time cannon arm, but he's going to take work. And I think that Franks could be a project. And I don't say that as a curse word. It might take him some time, but that guy could be an NFL quarterback. Whereas Corral doesn't have the prototypical frame. He's 6'2", probably around 190, 195. But that kid's ready to go. And he has an extremely high ceiling as a passer and a college quarterback. But I think both of them can be good.
Bill, I wanted to go over this with you, Bill. You're the numbers guy. He's played 30 games, which is of high school football. He's thrown 77 2 seasons. He's had 64% completion percentage. He's had 74 passing touchdowns. 74. That means he's throwing over 2 touchdowns per game that he's played. His quarterback rating is 130. And he got a little bit, Bill. He's got 816 rushing yards. He's got 17 rushing touchdowns. And, I really, really think that, Bill, this kid is going to be ready. He's going to have another full season as a starting quarterback.
You're breaking up there,
stars.
Yeah, I think Joey's breaking up here a good bit. So
my scramble button worked again.
But yeah, and I was going to definitely go with that too. The stats for Corral, speak for themselves here. And that's where we were going next. Thrown for 1,375 yards and 16 touchdowns as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, threw for 3,283 yards, 36 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. 68% of his throws his sophomore year, 19.5 yards per completion. His junior year, 3,025 yards, 22 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Completion percentage dipped a little bit to 64%. Average yards per completion climbed to 20. And then from Will Miles, he also he dug deep a little bit. You've heard him on this podcast before. His junior year last year, 12.9 yards per attempt, 5.7 yards per carry. So when you watch his tape, you can definitely see a gunslinger mindset. The comparisons to Rex Grossman, Brett Favre, Manziel, even Will Greer has been made. He shows great escapability behind an offensive line that doesn't do a great job of protecting him. And I love how he keeps his eyes downfield while he's scrambling around to either to escape pressure or finding a throwing lane. Has some ability to be dangerous, but make no mistake about it, he's looking to throw when he scrambles. A really nice touch on the deep ball. To no fault of his own, but I'd like to watch a full game of his because most of the highlights out there don't really show how he plays within, short, intermediate throws. We get to see the arm strength on display. But Steve Whitfong of 24/7 gives this description of Corral: taking snaps from under center and the gun. Corral is a window fitter with the football, has terrific feel for what's going on around him, and although he's not a burner, can extend plays with his good feet and feel in the pocket. So that's from someone that has seen him much more than we've gotten to see, Bill.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said there, Dave. I mean, this kid's got a monster arm. He really does. And, but the thing that really stood out to me. Yeah, we're good, Joey. The thing that stood out to me when watching his tape was when he is under pressure, he is cat quick. I mean, he is a quick twitch athlete when he's evading in the pocket, and he can really sting a defense. He's not a guy that's going to get 10 carries a game, out of a read option, I don't think, at Florida, but he's a guy that is going to break off a 15, 20, 25-yard scramble at times for clutch gains and moving the chains. So, and that's in addition to being what I think is going to be a big-time passer for Florida. So, yeah, this is a great pickup for Florida.
Bill, what I was saying before, before I broke up here, is that, he's not just an elite passer. He can run a little bit too. I think he's a little underrated in the rushing. He's got over 800 rushing yards in his career on 30 games. He's got almost 20 rushing touchdowns. So, he can move around. He's not immobile. I know he's listed as a pocket passer, but, I think he looks athletic. I don't think he's a statue. And I really think that, McElwain sees that kind of as a bonus. Whereas in a guy like Trevor Lawrence might be a little more immobile as far as being a more pure pocket passer.
Sure.
But I really like this kid. I like his numbers, Bill. And like I said before, too, he's at Long Beach Poly, which we know pumps out 5 stars left and right. They're, a football factory out in California, one of the elite schools in the country. Kind of like I would almost compare them to almost an IMG of the West. Kids transfer there all the time just to play football. Their coach is Antonio Pierce, who is a Super Bowl champion linebacker with the New York Giants. And, he really knows how to get kids to really play their best. And I'm glad, too, that he's coming east because we've talked about some issues that he might have had in the past, off the field stuff. But maybe getting him out of that environment, Bill, is the best thing, moving forward with him. And his mom was on his trip with him. And I think actually she wants him to leave California. I think she was kind of pushing for him to go to either Georgia or Florida and play in the SEC. And a lot of times, Bill, that's all it takes is someone to get out of their environment and be around, a good, wholesome coaching staff that's going to take care of them for them to really blossom. And I think Corral's a good kid at heart. I really do. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to be for the University of Florida for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, we kind of talking about stats and where he goes to school. He actually had been going to Oaks Christian High School, which is in Westlake, California, and that, as it happens, that's where Duke Lemons was from, a Gator defensive end from Urban Meyer's time here. So this is not unprecedented for a player to come from out there to UF. However,
Ronald Corral too, #1 recruit in 2010, California kid.
That's right. But this is the same high school as Duke Lemons, and he's transferring. Yeah. He had an altercation. It's a matter of public record. It was Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player's son. They're big-time boosters of the school. It ended up with Corral transferring to Long Beach Poly, like you said. So, there's a lot of he said, she said around this scenario and what happened. And, I've seen a video interview with Corral where he acknowledged he kind of had a rough year. And I don't know the specifics of what was going on out there, but he also had some contrition and was talking about how he was focused and moving forward and, just trying to turn things around. And this, like you said, it's going to be a great new start for him. But what I would encourage fans to do is follow his statistics at Long Beach Poly. It's going to be a little tough. He's going to step right into a new team, but against some great competition. So it'll be fun to watch and see how he responds and how their stats move.
Bill, what's hilarious is I saw on Twitter today, I was getting Fourth and Jort sent some questions to us, but, since when do people care about character coming to the University of Florida, okay? Percy Harvin didn't even play his senior year because he was kicked off his football team for basically getting in a huge fight at school at a football game.
Wasn't it a ref? Didn't he hit a ref?
Yeah, with the he hit a ref. He hit a ref and he got kicked out of the league, out of his high school football league. So he couldn't play his senior year, but yet he was still a top 5 recruit in the country. So, you know, we've seen coaches in the UF's history obviously take players with some sketchy past, but you know, it doesn't always turn into an Aaron Hernandez situation. Okay, let's not go to the extreme, you know, and compare Matt Corral getting in a fight in high school. Who didn't get in a fight in high school? I got in a fight in high school. I mean, let's not compare somebody that's gotten into a fight in high school to, you know, a serial killer or, you know, somebody that turns into a career criminal. So, you know, those questions I want to put to bed, those questions that we were getting asked on Twitter earlier. I don't think Mac wants to recruit kids with questionable character just because he wants to win. I think he genuinely cares about these kids, just like he did with James Robinson, David. As you remember, James Robinson basically had nowhere to go. And if it wasn't for Florida, David, who knows where his future would have been? McElwain decided to take him. McElwain said he's family. He wants to care for this kid. He's a good kid, and he wants to make sure that his future is bright. So, you know, McElwain wants to take a chance on a kid to help him out. Let's not disparage that and say, oh, he's choosing talent and choosing, you know, questionable paths to sacrifice for winning. It's not like that. McElwain's not that kind of guy. I've met Jim McElwain. Jim McElwain is a genuine man. I've met Urban Meyer before. Urban Meyer's not very genuine, okay? Urban Meyer comes off as a complete phony. Will Muschamp kind of seems a little phony too. But Jim McElwain is a genuine good old boy from Montana, and he is everything that he says he is.
Well, and I think Florida did their due diligence in the research of the off-field issues dealing with Matt Corral. And from everything we heard, you know, they cleared out to where they weren't that big of an issue. And you can even, with these recent interviews with Corral and what he has kind of spoken to about one reason he chose Florida, the word family comes up a bajillion times when he's talking about Florida, Doug Nussmeier, Jim McElwain. And, you know, he is coming from California, and it will be an important part of him being at Florida is having that family atmosphere, because he's not going to have any family around here. And he's mentioned how, you know, he can go to the coaches' houses and homes and be invited there, and, you know, to help, you know, with the lack of being without, you know, people he knows until he gets around his teammates and he gets to know these teammates better. He was really high on Doug Nussmeier, Jim McElwain and especially Jim McElwain, that whole family atmosphere. And we've heard a lot of the recent recruits that have just been, you know, Dunlap, Pitts, Russell, Lane. Russell was another one who really threw that family first atmosphere that Florida is selling out there. So as you mentioned, you know, we've mentioned in the past how different Jim McElwain probably wants to recruit. He wants to recruit based off of results, and he wants to recruit based off of relationships. He's been here a while now where these relationships look like they're starting to take hold. And the new coaches that he's brought in have made some differences along those areas as well. So it really looks like, you know, we were talking about recruiting earlier in this episode. It really looks like this family, this relationship, and now maybe, hopefully, we get the big-time quarterback, he can start selling results as well.
Yeah, and I do want to add one other thing. There's been a lot of back and forth between fans about this situation where character questions, and one of the things that's been said is, oh, well, nobody's pushing for him. And there was definitely a musical chairs game going on here with Fields and Matt Corral amongst a few schools, and that really would be Florida, Georgia, and Florida State, and basically three schools jockeying for two quarterbacks. And now somebody's going to be the odd man out, and it's not going to be Florida. And sure, I think it's pretty clear that Corral was kind of the second choice there, and that those schools had zeroed in on Fields as the top choice. But that doesn't mean that a lot of schools wouldn't have taken Corral. I mean, out of the top 35 pro-style quarterback prospects in the country, there's only 5 that are left uncommitted. And that's because, you know, Clemson, Washington, Miami, Stanford, Utah, Michigan, North Carolina, you know, you go down the list, Tennessee, these teams already have their guy. And it happens so late in the process where there just weren't a lot of spots available, because once these teams have their guy, they roll with them and they don't just kick the guy they got. So I kind of reject the notion that, you know, teams didn't want Corral. I think it just so happened that Florida, Florida State, and Georgia were chasing Fields, and then Corral was open to both Florida and Georgia. And it just really worked out in McElwain's favor. He did a great job identifying the guy, getting him in there. They blew him away on the visit. I just think this is huge. It's just huge.
And a lot of those West Coast schools out there already have their quarterbacks wrapped up as well. I mean, UCLA, Stanford, Arizona State, all those schools already had their quarterbacks wrapped up a long time ago too. So there really wasn't a lot of schools out west that really could afford, to bring or try and go after Corral, already having their quarterbacks in hand.
If you guys notice, though, most of the last several years of recruiting, the big-time quarterbacks have solidified the recruitment months ahead of signing day. You don't really see big-time quarterback prospects waiting until the 11th hour, so to say, to make their decision. We saw Eason. Well, Eason was committed to Georgia, so that doesn't even count. Florida was pushing, but he was still committed to Georgia, and he stuck with Georgia. So, you see a lot, and Eason was committed to Georgia for what, David, about 8 months, 9 months?
It was something
prior to signing day.
It was something.
Yeah, it was a long time. So, you don't really see too many big-time quarterback prospects. I mean, the entire Elite 11 outside of Justin Fields and Matt Corral was committed, right? Isn't that correct?
Yeah, Lawrence.
At the time. Yep. Every one of them.
Jimmy Jones, all those guys, Ohio State.
Yep. Yeah. So, and the reason that is, I think a lot of these coaches with these camps are identifying the quarterbacks earlier now, and they're trying to push harder for earlier commitments, and they're getting them. And I applaud Jim McElwain for, I think it was either boom or bust with getting either Fields or Corral to commit this weekend. I think you had to get one of the two to commit, and obviously Corral, there was a better opportunity. Fields had spent some time at Florida State for a couple of days prior to coming to Friday Night Lights. And I do want to say this, hats off to McElwain for that Friday Night Lights. Not only did he get Justin Fields to show up, which we've seen in the past, we got let down many a times with big prospects and not showing up. He got Fields to actually perform and throw. That's huge. Let's not put that down, because when you get a kid that comes from Tallahassee for 2 days and he actually spends the time to take 2 hours to drive from Tallahassee to Gainesville, and he actually performs in front of, the coaches and the crowd, I mean, that's big. So I really, really just don't want to understate that enough, that McElwain put on basically the best Friday Night Lights that many have said has ever taken place at Florida.
That's an interesting point, Joey, because, really the allure of that camp is not just that the big players are going to Florida are going to be there, that it's a destination for the elite in the country wherever they go. And, having those extra quarterback arms there that are just the stud QBs and just recruits from around the country that are just the elite of the elite is what creates a draw. It's what creates that luster around the program, is those type of events. You want people saying, I'm going to Friday Night Lights. And then that's how you go to the next guy that maybe is not thinking about going to Florida next year, but maybe he decides to come in because Justin Fields did the same thing. And well, maybe you get the next guy. It all kind of compounds on itself. So yeah, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for sure. And guys, we knew, as we mentioned earlier, once we started seeing the list, and when we saw Thursday, Friday kind of roll around, I think we kind of all tweeted, and we all looked at, this Friday Night Lights here felt like Friday Night Lights of old. The Friday Night Lights of Urban Meyer and early Will Muschamp and getting big recruits on campus. That's exactly what it felt like there. So I know we've done some digging into past quarterbacks here. If we compare Corral and how big of a commit this is Florida, and how in relation to past Florida quarterbacks, Brock Berlin is the first one that comes to mind. He was the main big-time stalwart quarterback, highest, I think it was the number 2 overall recruit in the nation. Bill, I know you've done some research on how past Florida quarterbacks, and how Corral fits into that. Uh-oh. Bill, you there?
We lost Joey.
I'm here.
Okay, you get a lot of feedback.
Oh,
yeah, it's fading back pretty bad there.
I'm here.
Yeah. Bill, I was talking about how I don't know if you heard me or not, how Corral fits into the past Florida recruits. Brock Berlin coming to mind, being the high-profile number 2 overall quarterback recruit.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some argument back and forth about where Corral fits in that hierarchy. Hey, Joey, you're feeding back there, buddy.
See me?
Yeah, we hear you. This noise is way too loud.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. We'll get that edited. There's been a lot of back and forth about where Corral fits in the hierarchy of Gator quarterback recruiting over the years. And, some people have cited rivals saying he's the highest rated quarterback since Tebow or ever, back to Brock Berlin. And there's not a consensus among the scouting services on whether he's a 4 or a 5-star. You have 2 of them, Rivals and Scout, have him a 5-star. One is the 7th ranked player in the country. One is to 20th. That's overall, regardless of position. The other 2, ESPN and 247, have him as a 4-star and still in that top 80, 90 recruits in the country. And his composite score, the one I like to lean on, which is an aggregator that takes all those into consideration, it does have him as a 4-star, not as a 5. But that's still, as the number 23 player in the country, the number 1 4-star, like if he gets, one extra throw this year, could be bumped to a 5-star. It's really splitting hairs. But if just going by the raw data, like I said, highest rated since 2011, I think there was some concern amongst a couple of the services that bumped him down to a 4-star. When he went out to the opening, he took that kind of Brett Favre mentality. Rex Grossman were maybe forcing some balls in there. Then he had only like a 56% completion percentage at the opening finals, and he had 7 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions. So he didn't have that same ball security, didn't have that same high completion percentage. And I think that maybe some of the services felt that against the higher competition, he was letting those get away from him, and that kind of spooked him a little bit on that 5-star status. But what I do want to tell you guys is that's really splitting hairs. And don't look at these services. It's not like they're bumping him down to say, well, the guy can't play. They're saying, okay, maybe he's not, one of the first team All-American as like number 1 or number 2 quarterback in the country. They're saying maybe there's another 20 guys in the entire United States we'd rank ahead of him. That's nothing. It's just minuscule difference. To have a top 25 player in the nation, top 30 player in the nation is just huge. It's the kind of guys you need to see coming into the University of Florida. They are the ones that lead your team to glory. It's just an argument that doesn't need to happen. It's big time either way.
And that's why it goes back to my point, David, about what I was talking about on Twitter earlier about Corral has to be ready to start. You don't get the number 27 recruit in the country and have him come in and redshirt him. I'm sorry. And somebody, Tony Agolini, one of our followers, he said earlier, compared Jameis Winston to redshirting. Jameis Winston was playing baseball at Florida State. He got a full scholarship for baseball and football. There was many that believed his redshirt freshman year that he wasn't going to play football at Florida State. They actually thought he was going to be a baseball player full time. So that was another reason why Jimbo redshirted him, was specifically for baseball purposes. So that's kind of a different situation. But if you look back at guys that 5-stars that came to Florida and played, Jeff Driscoll played as a true freshman. Tim Tebow played as a true freshman. Chris Leak played as a true freshman. Brock Berlin would have played, but Rex Grossman was there, and Rex Grossman should have won the Heisman the year before, or that year. So, you got to put it into context, and I think Matt Corral has to be a guy that you start as a true freshman. I didn't say that you start him game 1, but I think you got to ease him into that season, because even if you redshirt him, David and Bill, and he turns out to everything that we hope he will, you're still only going to have him for 2 years, because he's going to be out of high school for 3 years. So you might as well maximize your usage out of him for a kid that talented. And going back to these recruiting services, Bill, it's crazy because ESPN has him ranked 87th. Amari Burney is actually the highest ranked commit that Florida has on the ESPN 300 still, which is absolutely incredible. And I know that ESPN is kind of does their own thing. They don't really follow any other recruiting services because they got, guys like Craig Haubert and Tom Luganbill and guys like those that kind of do the composites themselves. But 24/7 has them ranked 27th. Is that right, Bill?
Which service?
24/7. They have them ranked 27th.
23rd.
They've got as a 4-star ranked actually 61st in the country. That's the 24/7. That's their proprietary ranking. But their 24/7 composite has him ranked 23rd. That's the one that factors.
That's the one I was looking at. Yeah,
right.
And Scout has him as a 5-star.
Yep.
Right. You got 2 services that have him as a 5-star. 2 is a very
Rivals has him as a 5-star, right? Rivals has him as a 5-star.
Yeah, and in the big picture, if we're measuring, the 5-stars and some of these big picture recruiting metrics, sure, it matters. And I won't bump him up out of, bias, just like I won't bump Antonio Callaway up, because Antonio Callaway was ranked as a 3-star about like all but one, or excuse me, a 4-star by all but one service, but his composite remained a 3 because of the outlier. And so that gives ammo to the, some of those that don't trust the Stars as much, and I don't want to cheat them out of that. And at the same time, I don't think we should be biased and, try to bump Corral's ranking up. I think what we just need to do is look at the guy and say he's a big-time, highly rated quarterback, and it doesn't matter.
Just say he's the third-ranked quarterback in the country, which he is. He's the third-ranked quarterback overall in the country.
It's a silly debate. He's a stud recruit, and he's an Army All-American. He's going to get every opportunity to earn that 5th star back. He's going to throw against the best in the country. Probably going to get it.
And let's not mention, when he originally got that 5-star ranking, it was because of what he mostly done in helmets and shoulder pads. When he got dropped, it was 7-on-7. It was, playing in your underwear. So, when we come back to August and September, when you got the helmets and shoulder pads back on, and he has another good over 3,000 yard passing and 20 to 30 touchdowns, more than likely, I would have to say he gets that 5-star back.
Yeah, and bottom line here, guys, is you look at what Jim McElwain has coming into spring next year in the quarterback competition. You're going to get a third-year Felipe Franks. You're going to get a early entry Matt Corral. You might even get Malik Zaire back, and then you got Jake Allen, who's going to have I'm sure a redshirt year if all goes well to sit there and tune up. That quarterback roster is a complete mirror image.
Speaking of what Malik Zaire coming back next year, what I'm hearing is his father is actually pretty sure that he's going to get that extra year of eligibility due to the medical hardship. So I would not be surprised, like you said, Bill, if Malik Zaire is coming back next year, and if Malik Zaire has a good season this year.
All right,
it's a win-win.
Yeah, so there we go. So there's definitely one scenario. Zaire has a good season where Corral's not coming in and starting.
No, you ease him in. I didn't say start him, week 1 unless he's lights out in camp, in spring. But you could ease him in like Chris Leak. They did to Chris Leak. It took Chris Leak 4 games to start. They had Ingle Martin. Ingle Martin was the starter that year, and Ingle Martin absolutely stunk up the joint the first 4 games of the season. And I think Zook was just said, we got the number 1 quarterback in the country. Let's play him and see what we can do. And he ended up taking the Gators to the Outback Bowl his freshman year.
Beat number 1 LSU, or the team that won the national championship that year, LSU.
That's right. He did. What was the final score? Like 13-9 or something like that?
It was 16.
But Zook, like we said about Zook, he never had a problem winning the big games. Big game Ron Zook. He never had an issue, but he lost to Mississippi State when they won 2 games that year, and he lost some pretty pathetic games.
But go back. We've said the names. When we mentioned Matt Corral, you go back through recent history. Chris Lee, Tim Tebow, Brock Berlin, Jeff Driscoll. Those are the names you were comparing him to when you're talking about high profile recruits that have come to Florida, and how they pan out or how they don't pan out. So it's nice to see where he kind of ranks among the recent history high profile Florida quarterbacks.
Dave, where were you in 2005? Were you with ESPN at that time?
I started there January of 2006, so right after Urban Meyer's first year. So
okay, so
I was there when they had the first big signing day when they got Tebow.
Do you remember that Tim Tebow had his own basically documentary as a high school senior called The Chosen One? Okay,
yep.
His game, I think ESPN televised 4 or 5 of Nice's high school football games that year. Yep. They went and played Hoover. Hoover that year. That was the first big game of the season. I think it was the last weekend of August. And he ended up beating Hoover that game. But so this is not foreign territory for Florida fans to get, to be all in on a big time quarterback. We didn't have Twitter then, but we, had Facebook was just kind of coming in its own, and MySpace. But, the buzz about Tim Tebow was huge. It really was. We were counting the days to Tim Tebow's arrival in January of that spring semester, if you can remember, Bill and David.
Yeah, and listen, just kind of springboard on this. You were talking about the comparison to past quarterbacks. You guys know, the listeners know, I'm one that when you look at the bigger sets of data, the trends will play out. You bring a bunch of 5 stars in, you're going to win more games. That's just what happens. But when you look at the micro sense from player to player, this quarterback position is hard to evaluate. And you look at 2006. Well, Tim Tebow was the 3rd ranked passer behind, I believe it's Matt Stafford and Mitch Mustaine. Well, he certainly ended up, the jewel of that class, from a college football standpoint. Cam Newton in 2007 was the 6th ranked quarterback, and he's got the closest rating and ranking comparison of all the quarterbacks Florida signed. I mean, Matt Corral is rated a .9829 in the composite score. Cam Newton was a .9831. Cam Newton was ranked the 28th player in the country. Matt Corral's the 23rd. So I just don't get hung up on, in a micro sense, well, this guy is a few spots back. I mean, even Justin Fields, sure, Justin Fields looked really good at the opening. At the same time, the last game of his season last year for Kennesaw Harrison, he was 10 of 16 for 132 yards, and they lost the game, and he ran 14 times, losing 49 yards. So good quarterbacks get shut down. There's variation. These guys still have to develop and prove it on the field. But he is in that range. Matt Corral is in the range you look for to say this guy has a higher chance of being a stud quarterback at your university. Florida got that. That's what they've needed. This is a huge win.
And hey, look, we got excited, and Bill, I know you mentioned, we got excited because he is a high-profile recruit. That's why Gator Nation got excited. A lot of people out there follow 24/7 and Rivals and Scout and ESPN for recruiting, and if they're right, that's why everybody's excited.
Yeah, and look, you wouldn't have that kind of pandemonium if it was some guy that had no offers.
Right there.
All right. I mean, you wouldn't have that kind of pandemonium if it was a quarterback that was a no-name quarterback that had no offers. Everybody knows these kids that are high profile often become stars on the collegiate level. And so that's why we're excited, because it does matter. It doesn't matter in every case, but in the big picture, it does. And so, look, I've been the first one to tell you guys I've got concerns. I've still got concerns about Gator recruiting. This is a long season. There's a real chance for an opportunity, though, to really take ground and to show that the changes that McElwain is putting into place, bringing more quality arms into camp, hiring these hired gun recruiters like we talked about after signing day, show that it's working. And all indications from Friday Night Lights and the weeks that are surrounding on the before and the week after, it looks like that may be happening. That is a reason to look at the data and say, maybe I wasn't happy with this before, but this is what I wanted to see. This is really good news.
Joey, you're going to have to jump back in. I had to mute you for a second. Bill, I don't think Joey knows he's out right there. So,
Bill, you're always the pessimist, aren't you?
No, I'm not being pessimistic, man. I'm just calling it like it is. I mean, I want to be truthful and as objective as I can. I mean, I've got my own opinions that are skewed from my own point of view and worldview, but there are plenty of things they need to still work on. I mean, and going forward, we need to see some of these defensive spots in this class get filled up because it is a little tilted right now towards the offense. But it's also tilted with a view that looks like it's going to be a top 10 class. It looks like it could be tremendous on the offensive side of the ball. If they can fill these spots, make this
top 10, Bill, I think Florida's aiming for a top 5 class right now. I mean, it's still early. I mean, and like I said, the triple effect is in play. I think top 5 class has got to be Florida's ceiling right now, isn't it?
It is possible. And Dave, whenever you're ready, we can talk about that. I've actually done a couple mock-ups on what it will take to get to the top 10 and the top 5. But it's going to really have to break their way in a special way, in a way we haven't seen from a McElwain class yet. Again, that's not to say it can't happen, but the top 10, I feel like, is a real good chance at this point. They've got a very solid shot at a top 10.
Yeah, that's definitely where I was going to go next. We've mentioned this ripple effect. We've mentioned how recruits kind of conglomerate towards a high-profile quarterback, and Matt Corral is that. And we saw reaction from recruits on social media, how they were excited. The guys who are already committed to Florida, some maybe who are getting ready to commit to Florida, and some guys who may be now targets that maybe weren't going to be targets before Florida found their quarterback. So how much does this set up the rest of the class of 2018? I know Bill's ran some numbers, and there is a path to a top 10. There's a path to a top 5. In the last week or so, we've seen some big names: Curtis Dunlap, Kyle Pitts, Randy Russell, Dante Lane. Just within the last week, in the last few days, more could be on the way soon. So, Bill, can you map us out a top 5 or a top 10?
Yeah, first let me start with the top 10 and tell you what needs to happen. Right now, we're sitting at about a 42% blue chip percentage in the class. That's 7 out of the 12 being 4 stars or better. Now, there are no 5 stars at this point from a 247 composite. I'm not throwing shade on Matt Corral. Like I said, I use the composite just because it considers all the services. And based on that, they've got 7 4 stars and 5 3 stars. To end up in that top 10, they really need to start landing those 4- and 5-star recruits almost at 100%. They can't really afford too many more 3-stars unless the class is going to be bigger than we think it is. But to get there specifically, here's what we're looking at. The players that I think they have a really good shot to close out with, that they need to land to reach that top 10 ranking, would be like a running back named like Dameon Pierce, wide receivers, let's say Jacob Copeland, who looks like he's about to commit, Anthony Schwartz, who's the burner, runs a 4.3 40, maybe one of the fastest wide receivers or football players in the country this year, from South Florida. He's probably to be a Florida commit. The offensive line class, we've talked about that. They could add William Barnes, Richard Garage, and Ed Montelis from Apopka. Then the defensive line, which is going to be critical. If they were to land Dante Stills, who are in the thick of things for out of West Virginia, defensive tackle, Malcolm Lamar, a big combo lineman type. He's coming in around 250, 260, I believe. And then Andrew Chatfield, who just got crystal ball to Florida, who's a current Ohio State commit. At defensive end, he might even play some linebacker. And then I only added one DB to this, safety Quantel Rains out of Pennsylvania. If they can land that group, Pierce, Copeland, Schwartz, Barnes, Garage, Montelis, Stills, Lamar, Chatfield, and Quantel Rains. None of these guys are reaches right now. These are all within striking distance for Florida. They would end up with a class score of 270.26 on 24/7 Sports. The average of the number 10 class the past 5 years is 265. So that would be more than enough in most years to reach the top 10. Now, if they somehow were to add Nicholas Petit-Frere, the offensive lineman out of Florida, who's giving them a very strong look right now, is very highly rated top 100 recruit on 24/7's composite. Linebacker Channing Tindall. Who,
big time. Big time.
He's been leaning to South Carolina. If they can steal him and then maybe land a Tyreke Johnson.
Yeah, that's huge.
Out of Trinity Christian. It would just take those 3 players that would be the difference from the top 10 class to the top 5 class. So, Joey, yes, Florida can land a top 5 class at this point. But what you're basically talking about is just a straight run of 4- and 5-star athletes for the rest of the class. And I mean, that would be a verifiable snowball avalanche, whatever you want to call it. It would have to all break their way. If they beat Michigan, watch out. You watch what happens if they come out there and Zaire or Franks throws for 250 yards against Michigan, 3-to-1 touchdown ratio. It could happen. But that's where they've got to be. They've got to add close to a dozen kids here.
Did you factor in Copeland?
Yes, I did. And
okay.
Copeland would be in the top 10. And then, I think they're going to have a great wide receiver class. I think they're going to have a great offensive line class. It's really going to come down to that defensive line. They've got to land Stills. They've got to land Lamar. They need some more of these big defenders. We don't want to get in a situation.
Need linebackers.
They do, but the main thing, I want to see those alphas on defense because I don't want to get in a situation where we're flip-flopping the roster from the Muschamp years. They got to have that balance. People talk about that. And they did that last year. The defensive class was good, but it's got to continue. It's got to be an every year thing.
I think Tyreke Johnson would be a huge pickup for Florida. He was at Friday Night Lights on Friday. He would be monstrous. Tyreke Johnson would be one of the best defensive backs that Florida's gotten, in a couple of years. So I don't want to understate that. And we were talking about Trinity Christian in your neighborhood there, David. Yep. That should be a stronghold for Florida, David. That Jacksonville area should be a stronghold for Florida, and there's no excuse.
There, so
there's no excuse.
So I did a Florida connection, so yeah.
That used to be my old neighborhood too. I used to get kicked out of there for fishing at Trinity all the time.
And I think we keep talking about receivers, and Bill, I was going through some stuff. I mean, and Jamar Chase as well. Who's now getting high on the high probability of maybe landing with TCU and LSU there.
Yeah, he's another one. And this wide receiver class is suddenly looking a little crowded because, they've got Jalen Williams. Jacob Copeland is on the cusp of committing. And they've got Gamage, who's a good-looking prospect. So that's, basically the 3 of them that are almost locked down now. You don't want to turn Schwartz away. That kind of speed has been missing from the roster. You don't want to turn that guy away. But if Chase wants in, how do you tell him no? So there's about to be some difficult decisions.
And I think Florida's going to lose some receivers to transfer. They just lost one, Chris Williamson, obviously, that opened up a scholarship. But, Florida's receiving core right now, the depth chart is stupid. I mean, it's almost stupid backed up. You got guys like Hammond and Wells, Rick Wells, and Swain, Tyree, Callaway this year, who's obviously surely gone. So, you got a lot of kind of backup, especially if Robinson ends up coming in too. You got him next year. So I think Florida's going to have to allow some people to leave. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but they need to open up some scholarships, or else Florida's not going to be able to take the class that they want to take this year just in numbers.
Yeah, Williamson actually was a safety that's transferring. But yeah, there's definitely
Williamson came in as a wide receiver.
Right, but he was playing safety in the spring game.
But that's probably why he transferred, actually.
It might have been.
Yeah.
But, I think one of the keys for Florida as they move forward is they look to really capitalize on this momentum and really go for the jugular and get things back right where it was, and finally get over the funk of the Muschamp era, finally kind of put some of those, ghosts in the past. I want to see them raid Miami's class again. Right now we're receiving reports across the network there that, you've got 3 or 4 of their guys that once again are on flip watch between Gilbert Frierson, the 4-star cornerback that in the 2018 class, he showed up to Friday Night Lights and had great things to say about Florida. I've heard 4-star offensive line Cleveland Reed could be in play. So that's yet another offensive lineman, that's a stud that could end up in the class. 2019 4-star defensive end Derek Hunter, and the one that I think could really make things right on defense for Florida, I would really like to see defensive tackle Nesta Silvera flip to the Gators. Haven't seen a whole lot about that again lately, but I think Miami could start hemorrhaging recruits once again, and if that starts to happen and they fall from glory late once again, he could be in play.
Bill, I can't understate Channing out of South Carolina, though, on that defense. I think if you can peel him away from his home school and Will Muschamp, I think that would be a huge recruiting coup for McElwain and his staff. Channing's a big-time linebacker, and, that's like beating out, basically running in his house, kicking down the door, eating his food in his refrigerator, and walking him out the door holding his hand. So, that would be huge. That really would be.
Yeah, and sometimes the South Carolina kids are a little tough, but that's something Florida should be able to do most of the time. Not against their in-state rivals all the time, but against South Carolina, it's a couple of tiers down from Florida's a football program. That's something you would expect. I know Florida State.
Muschamp the recruiter is different, though. Muschamp the recruiter is different.
No, I get that, man. Right. I'm not saying it should be an automatic, but Florida State's also involved there, and so that could turn into a 3-way dogfight for Channing Tindall's signature.
It would be a fun little battle with Florida State, Muschamp at South Carolina and Florida. And as we mentioned, he was definitely high on Friday, at Friday Night Lights and being able to show off there. So, guys, anything else? We'll have some shows later this week that I'll tease in a minute. But anything else from Friday Night Lights that just caught your eye and how important it was for Florida?
It's huge, but I got to talk about one guy that committed right before Friday Night Lights, and that's Curtis Dunlap, the offensive lineman. This is a kid that, he started the year, and last year he was overweight, a lot like Jawan Taylor, the big Florida schools, even though he was a 4-star guy, a very highly rated recruit that got invited to the opening finals. They were kind of waiting on him to kind of trim up and transform his body before they pulled the trigger, just like they did with Jawan Taylor. Well, he's still heavy. He's going to be a big, massive offensive lineman. He needs to get in the strength and conditioning program at Florida, but he has started to transform his body. He went out to the opening. He just looks like a road grader. He's a dominant drive blocker. Not perfect. He can get overextended a little bit because he is a little top heavy still, but Florida gave him the green light. All indications this guy's going to be a stud. Also, he is from the IMG Academy and is now primed to be Florida's first signee from that school. That's a talent factory where people basically go to school there just to play football. 10 D1 athletes usually every year, 20 maybe on the football team. And this is the first time Florida's been able to kick the door down there. That's progress. And lastly, he's also a former Ed White commander from Jacksonville Ed White, which is near Trinity, which has produced a lot of great Gators.
Isn't that your alma mater, Bill?
Yeah, it is. But
that's where he was going with that.
He's biased. I claim bias on this. Hey,
it's also produced at least 3 All-ACC Gators. Bam Hardman went there. Chester Blackshear. I played with both of those guys. Then D. Webb went there.
D. Webb.
So believe me, Ron Zook used to camp out in the parking lot. I saw him many a day up there when he was recruiting.
It's sad for D. Webb when the highlight of his Gator career, though, was breaking Tyrone Prothrow's leg on that touchdown pass. Yeah. That was ugly.
But yeah, I'm really excited to see Dunlap in the class, and I would love to see another success story like we saw with Jawan Taylor. And hey, look, Mac's proven he can do it, so hopefully we'll see it again.
What about you, Joey? Last thoughts for Friday Night Lights and recruiting going forward?
These coaches hit it out of the park, man. They really did. A lot of questions were answered. I had a couple of people actually send me direct messages on Twitter this weekend and apologize for doubting me when I said just wait, with the recruiting slander. I had one person, I won't name his name, he said, I'm eating my crow today. So the recruiting has improved vastly over the last 6 months. Bill, we all question McElwain's recruiting. And right now, I think we have to put that on pause, right?
No, look, this is
pause. I said pause. I didn't say get rid of it. I said pause.
No, but I don't want to pause because I don't want to withhold comment. I want to give.
You don't want to be who you really are. That's okay. I get it. You want to be true to yourself, the natural pessimist.
No, I don't want to withhold comment because my comment is praise for what McElwain is doing right now.
Yes.
But the data is the data, and I'm not retracting anything I've said. There's major concerns, and as of this Friday Night Lights, he answered that segment of the concerns with flying colors. And so now he's got to close this class out. He's got to show improvement. Is recruiting at Florida able to be sold and able to produce like it was under Meyer and Muschamp? I don't know that it is. And that's what I've always said. I'm not assigning blame yet to McElwain, but the data shows a problem. But suddenly we're seeing signs that could start to reverse. We did see progress with the 2017 class. Now let's see more. Let's be realistic as fans and let's have realistic expectations. He's not going to have the number one class. That's okay. You don't have to have the number one class every year, and maybe he will in a year or two.
Yeah, 19 is looking realistic, Bill. 19 is looking realistic.
Absolutely is. And so let's see him build something special like they're talking about. Keep moving forward. That's all I want out of McElwain.
Yep. And and here it was, reviewing this episode. And what was it? We were all waiting for him to get this big time quarterback. And there it is. It was the linchpin. And we on the field, we said, hey, Florida's missing a quarterback. In recruiting, we've said it somewhat. Yeah, Felipe Franks is here, but we haven't seen him yet. Maybe, and this is the guy everybody's pointing to in Matt Corral, who can be maybe the linchpin in Jim McElwain's career, in being the guy who sets it all up for the Gators to be the Gators that we know and playing, for SEC championships and winning SEC championships and get to big time bowl games and going to national championships. And that's what we want. And maybe it starts right here.
Yeah, that's right. Unless you're going to hoard 85-star players on your roster, and we're looking at you, Nick Saban, as a coach, your destiny is going to be tied to one or a couple of big-time quarterbacks. That's just the way it is between Urban Meyer and Tebow and Steve and Danny. You got to have that guy. Well, hopefully, McElwain just got his guy.
As much as I hate Saban, I can't stand the guy. He's a master at maneuvering his roster around with gray shirts and red shirts. Because this guy seriously seems to sign a class of 50 scholarship football players every year.
Yeah, it's something to behold, but hopefully this is the first step and maybe getting a little chink in the armor, and Florida can do something on the field to hit that. As we know, we said kick the door down a couple of times with recruiting this past episode, and that's Jim McElwain's goal to get to Atlanta and finally kick that door down, and it might be against Alabama.
Yeah.
All right. So, as I mentioned, we'll have a couple more shows this week. We'll have Blake Alderman on from Gator Bait. He'll review Friday Night Lights and talk more about Matt Corral. We'll get his thoughts on everything recruiting going on with the Gators. And Uncle Silk from the Big Three Roll-Up will also join us later in the week. He has a pulse that's kind of different from everyone else on recruiting and how the interaction he has throughout Gator Nation and how he sees everything. So that'll be an entertaining show if you guys know who Uncle Silk is. It'll be a different type of show. So you guys get ready for that one.
Thanks for having us on, and thanks to the fans. Please interact with us more on Twitter. We love it. We appreciate all the good dialogue from you guys and the follows. It's awesome. Thank you for the support.
For sure.
Thank you, guys. You make us who we are.
Very much so. So remember, you can find the episode on SoundCloud, iTunes. Just watch us live on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. So for Bill and Joey, I'm Dave. Thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.